welcome. You're watching Explosive Exclusive. I'm Padmaja Joshi. It's a truth universally acknowledged that war is dirty business, but terror that is wreaked on unarmed civilians is the absolute scum. Anyone who was in any doubt about this has been, or at least should have been, shaken out of any idealism by the images coming out even now of the havoc that Hamas has wreaked over a period of 24 hours on Saturday across Israel. The number of dead in Israel are at their highest in 50 years. In fact, since 2008, Israel lost 308 people in conflict. Compared to that, in one day alone, they lost 900 citizens and counting. Of these, only 123 are confirmed to be serving military, which means that 8 out of 9 people who have been killed in Israel by terrorists are actually civilians. In addition, the Hamas claims that they have 100 people held hostage and have threatened to start executing them publicly if the Israeli Defense Forces don't stop their action in Gaza. Nonetheless, so far, Israel has carried out 1,000 strikes inside the Gaza Strip. A military compound and a weapons warehouse has been hit since this morning. A combat management room in western Jabalia was also brought down since it was being used allegedly to coordinate the terror strike on Israel. Additionally, the IDF claims that 1,500 terrorists have been killed on Israeli soil. The human cost is deep and heavy in Gaza too. The Hamas-run health ministry says that 770 people have been killed and 4,000 wounded in the Gaza Strip in the last 2 days.
It's not a war. It's not a battlefield. You see the babies, the mother, the fathers in the bedrooms, in the protection rooms, and how the terrorists kill them. It's not a war. It's not a battlefield. It's a massacre. It's a terror activity. So you can look it about on yourself. It's something that I never saw in my life. It's something that we used to imagine as our grandfather and grandmother in the pogrom in Europe and other places. It's not something that happened in the new history, in the near history.
The individual stories out of Israel also are spine-chilling, each one of them, of small gated societies like the kibbutz Biri, where soldiers entered. They discovered that people had been shot inside bomb shelters, bodies piled one on top of another. In fact, 100 people are feared killed just in one kibbutz alone. One such video has now emerged where Hamas terrorists can be seen shooting people inside a bomb shelter, lobbing grenades to finish them off, and those who try to escape are almost used like target practice. In a way, it's ironic that it's only because of these images, perhaps, that people could not turn their eyes away. The world could not pretend that this was resistance anymore. Even now, globally, barring a few countries like Iran, there is a unanimous condemnation of this terror assault. Countries like Germany have said that they'll be rethinking their monetary aid to Palestine because of worries where their money might end up. In a joint statement today, France, Germany, Italy, UK and the US said that while they support legitimate aspirations of Palestinian people, the Hamas does not represent any of those aspirations and in fact offers Palestinians nothing more than terror and bloodshed.
Israel at war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way. But though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it. Once the Jewish people were stateless. Once the Jewish people were defenseless. No longer. Hamas will understand that by attacking us, they've made a mistake of historic proportions. We will exact a price that will be remembered by them and Israel's other enemies for decades to come. The savage attacks that Hamas perpetrated against innocent Israelis are mind-boggling, slaughtering families in their homes, massacring hundreds of young people at an outdoor festival, kidnapping scores of women, children, and elderly, even Holocaust survivors. Hamas terrorists bound, burned, and executed children. They are savages. Hamas is ISIS. And just as the forces of civilizations united to defeat ISIS, the forces of civilization must support Israel in defeating Hamas. I want to thank President Biden for his unequivocal support. I want to thank leaders across the world who are standing with Israel today. I want to thank the people and Congress of the United States of America. In fighting Hamas, Israel is not only fighting for its own people, it is fighting for every country that stands against barbarism. Israel will win this war. And when Israel wins, the entire civilized world wins.
The people who support Hamas are fully responsible for this appalling attack. They are not militants. They are not freedom fighters. They are terrorists. The days and weeks ahead will continue to be very difficult. But when we say that we stand with Israel, we mean it. Not just today, not just tomorrow, but always. And I will stand with you, the British Jewish community, not just today, not just tomorrow, but always. Am Yisrael Chai.
All right, so let's get you the view now from Israel and from Canada. John Mainley, former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, joins us. But I want to direct my first question to Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, who's the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem and Israel's Special Envoy for Innovation. Fleur, I want to start by asking you, it's been 4 days now. Today, in Jerusalem and in Israel, what is the overarching emotion? Is it anger? Is it hurt? Is it resolve? Or is it just hopelessness?
So I can tell you that Saturday and Sunday and possibly part of Monday, we were in shock, we were traumatized, and we were very depressed about what had happened. We didn't know where it was coming from. I've felt a shift in the mood in the last 24 hours of resilience, of action, and of intense patriotism to not only get our people back, who are now hostages in the hands of the barbaric Hamas, but also people helping in all sorts of social initiatives, providing food for families, providing help to the supportive families of the missing and the dead and the hostages, gathering to get supplies for soldiers, basic hygienic supplies. You know, the people of Israel are very resilient people. We know how to bounce back quickly. And I think that trauma has turned into action because we need to do something. We all feel that we need to do something for the war effort. We see this as an existential war against essentially the long arm of Iran and of the cult of Islamic extremism that wants to take us back 500 years. Well, the scenes that we saw in the last 2 days are ISIS scenes. And I think that's the best way for people to understand what we're talking about. These people are killing elderly women in their beds, the disabled, babies. They're now in Gaza putting babies in cages. These are not people that you can negotiate with, because these are not people who will ever accept anything other than an entire caliphate in the entire region. And it's no coincidence, let me tell you, that Israel was, had a very clear roadmap to peace with Saudi Arabia. And who is this not good for? This is not good for Iran, and this is not good for the proxies of Iran like Hezbollah and Hamas. So the mood in Israel today is defiance after coming out of mourning, trauma, and depression.
Ms. Nahoum, you're talking about Hamas being like ISIS. The counter to that is that Palestinian Authority says, what about the 121 children who have died in the bombing that Israel has done over the last 2 days? What about the 700 plus civilians they claim have been killed in the Gaza Strip? And they're asking the global community, why are you silent now?
Silent? Well, who started this? You know, what people don't seem to understand is that Israel does not occupy Gaza. We left almost 20 years ago in 2005. They've had 2 governments since we left. It started off with Fatah, and then 2 years later, there was an election, of course, only one time, like Iran. 1 man, 1 vote, 1 time, and that's over. And Hamas has been in power for 15 years. Now, Hamas is in power. They govern themselves. Why are they attacking Israel? Why have they been throwing rockets? What exactly do you want? And what they want is very clear because it's in their charter. They don't want any type of peaceful resolution. They want the complete annihilation of the state of Israel. Now, how do you deal with an enemy that wants to destroy you entirely? The difference between the civilians over there and over here is that they came to kill civilians. And we go over there and they hide behind their civilians. All of their terrorist infrastructure is in civilian areas, in hospitals, in schools. What they're doing is a double war crime because they kill our civilians, they target our civilians. Like you said, 90% of our dead are civilians. That's unheard of. And over there, they hide behind their civilians in order to attack us. Listen, Israel is the only country in the world that sends messages to different residents to tell them we're going to bomb their building. The collateral damage that is caused is something that we try to prevent because we have a moral code. Is war ugly? Yes, it is. Are there casualties of war that nobody wants to see? Absolutely. The difference is that we don't target civilians. The difference is that we warn civilians. And the difference is that this is their government and they're in charge of their civilians and they use their civilians cynically in order to launch attacks on Israel.
Let me bring in Mr. Manley. You know, you said, what do they want? I'll just come back to that question in a second, but I want to bring in Mr. Manley as well. Help us understand. On the one hand, Canada officially condemned the Hamas attack. On the other, across Canada, in Toronto, in Ottawa, we had Free Palestine marches, like this one, being taken out. How does that happen, Mr. Manley?
Well, it happens because we're an open democracy and people have different opinions. But I think not just the official opinion, but by far the majority opinion in Canada was that which was expressed yesterday by both the Prime Minister and the leader of our official opposition, which denounced the attacks, which denounced Hamas, which describes it as a terrorist organization. The Prime Minister said these people are not freedom fighters, as they would like to characterize themselves. They are terrorists, and terrorism is something that we all resist. Of course, you can. Canada's a democracy where you can always get somebody that will show up at a meeting to claim anything, but the freedom of speech does not represent any kind of Canadian official policy.
You know, the interesting thing is, just as an aside, because we are talking about free speech, I'm reading out from what Mr. Justin Trudeau said. He said the glorification of violence is never acceptable in Canada by any group or any situation. I strongly condemn the demonstrations that have taken place. In India, this actually really struck a chord because 1 month ago when we asked how is it that a Gurdwara in Brampton has posters seeking the assassination of our diplomats in Canada, we were told this is free speech by Canadian standards. How is it that this is okay to have posters seeking assassination of Indian diplomats, but the Prime Minister condemns a Free Palestine rally?
Well, it's not okay, but I'm not aware that any Indian diplomats were in fact assassinated. What we're seeing on your news feed today is the actual effect of the actions that were taken by Hamas. I don't think there can be any comparison between the two.
Let me come back to you, Ms. Nahoum. You know, the Palestinian Authority in their statement has said, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs State of Palestine, they say, we have warned against the consequences of daily provocations and attacks, including the continued settlers and occupations forces terrorism, as well as the raids on the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Christian and Islamic holy sites. They say over the last 2 years, worshippers at Al-Aqsa, they were mistreated, they were subjected to violence, and this is the result.
Well, it's a complete lie. You can't be surprised because they're known to be liars. I live in Jerusalem. I deal with foreign relations in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is an example of freedom of worship. Not only do we organize the entire, first of all, every Friday we have tens of thousands of Muslims coming to peacefully pray in the Temple Mount. Then when Hamas want a war, what they do is they send 200 hooligans to throw rocks and desecrate their own mosque. And when the security forces go in, they say we've raided Al-Aqsa. This is a game that they've been playing for many, many years. There's nothing could be further from the truth. More than that even, every Friday of Ramadan, we facilitate transport to all Muslims that want to come to pray on Temple Mount. So we are an example of freedom of worship. I don't think you're going to find anywhere in the world where in 1 square kilometer you have Christian sites, Muslim sites, and Jewish sites, and for the most part, everybody is worshiping in their own way with freedom of worship. So first of all, that's a lie that they invent in order to justify attacking Jews. That's what they do. That's what they've always done. In terms of Gaza, like I said, we're not in Gaza, so I don't know what they're talking about. In terms of the West Bank, we have 94% of the Palestinians are living under the Palestinian Authority, 94% of the Palestinians. The rest of them are living in Area C, where we also have some Jewish neighborhoods. And those, under the Oslo Accords, that is the area that is left to discuss who's going what and where is going where. But 94% of Palestinians are living under their own authority. Now, what happens with that authority is that they don't govern. They steal from their people. They build themselves castles. They benefit financially from the conflict. They don't do any economic development. They don't give people jobs. How do we know that? Because Israel gives tens of thousands of work permits to Palestinians to come into Israel because their own government don't take care of their own people. And so their bad governance should not be blamed on us. And that's what they've done for 100 years, scapegoatism to us for their lack of governance, for their corruption, and for their barbarism. And enough is enough. When you start every single war and lose it, shouldn't there be a price to pay for losing wars you started?
But Mr. Manley, who pays the price? Again, there are many rights organizations who are saying these are people who are living in an open-air jail. That's what the Gaza Strip has been turned into.
Define open-air jail. Define it. What does that mean? They have a border with Egypt. Is that a blockade that we're responsible for? No. Now, we have all of these arms that they've received to attack us. And those arms are coming into Gaza. And that is with a blockade of Israel. What would happen, I ask you, if we didn't control the sea around Gaza? What would happen? Every single genocidal regime in the planet would be using Gaza as a launch pad. Instead, we only have Iran.
Mr. Manley, again, as
I
a
think
Western power...
The Deputy Mayor is right, and I don't think a great deal has changed in the years since I visited Gaza multiple times as Canadian Foreign Minister, that we have had long-seated, before Hamas, corruption in the Palestinian Authority. We've had people who are living in what is among the most impoverished conditions on the planet because they have been unable to accommodate themselves to the continuing existence of their border state of Israel, and have failed to build any kind of local economy, despite aid being poured in from many sources, including Canada. So it is a tragic situation, but the very fact of that tragedy is to be blamed not on the government of Israel, I don't believe, but on the governments that have been in some cases chosen by the Palestinians themselves in Gaza.
All right, I'm going to leave it at that. There is a huge human cost that this conflict has extracted, but remember, it was started by a terror attack. Does a country have the right to self-defense and the right to protect its citizens and its sovereignty? I will leave it to the viewers for the time being. Mr. John Manley, Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, thanks very much for joining us.